Let's get into today's episode of Why We Succeed. Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your man, Jay Immanuel, and we are back with a new episode of Why We Succeed. Today, I'm joined by a very, very special guest, the one and only, my man, Armani. What's going on with you, bro?
What's good, Jay? I appreciate you for having me on the podcast, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, man, this is going to be fun. Yo, Armani, I had the opportunity of coming across your Twitter account, and just some of the posts that you put up were so inspiring. I was responding to them, and I want to say thank you, for some of the retweets that you had. And that's how I first came across your content. I then learned that you had a YouTube channel, and you put out some amazing content when it comes to helping people develop charisma, become a better speaker. And I'm excited to have you on here to talk about your journey as an entrepreneur. But man, I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show. And you put out some amazing content, man.
I appreciate it, man. And I'm not going to lie, Jay. I've been on a bunch of different podcasts since starting in 2018. Mm-hmm. And I got to say, you're probably the most prepared, punctual, detailed-oriented person I've thus far, leading up to the podcast. So yeah. I appreciate you for that.
I appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for that. And it is a joy. I really enjoy connecting and meeting new people. And I'm excited just to learn more about your journey, because I can already tell that you're somebody who's committed to doing what you're doing as a content creator and as a businessman. I can tell that you genuinely have an interest in helping people become better speakers and become more charismatic. And I'm excited to see what's led you down there. So I want to kick things off with one of the first questions that I always like to start off with my guests, which is, how do you define success?
Well, I would say one of the best definitions of success I heard was from Earl Nightingale. Mm-hmm. It's where you have a certain goal and you're consistently moving forward in that goal. And the bigger the goal, the more that you have a certain direction that you're working towards. So to sum up that question, I would say it's direction that's king.
Interesting. So what is the determining factor for your direction at any given season of your life?
So that is going to evolve, where what the person that you were 5 years ago, that may not necessarily be the same person that you are nowadays. But there are certain things that I believe are fundamental to human nature. And I believe if you can lead with clarity, where you're leading with introspection, and I'm going to do a little bit of a tangent, and I'm going to come back to exactly what you're talking about.
I'm going to follow you.
Yeah. So I wrote this tweet on my Twitter recently where I said that self-knowledge is king in the information age. The reason why is because there's too much knowledge out there nowadays, too much information, and people can convince you regarding anything. They could tell you that if you put your mind to it, you could grow 6 inches by tomorrow. There will be, there's going to be articles like that.
Yeah.
So you need to understand yourself the most. So I believe in each chapter of your life, if you are leading with self-knowledge, then there's always going to be that level of clarity that you're going to have. Rather than being that bag that's floating in the wind, you're going to switch your perspective to being that tree that's rooted. So to answer your question, I mean, each chapter you're going to change, but the one thing that I believe you should lead with is introspection and self-knowledge. That's going to allow you to navigate this digital landscape that we have nowadays.
I really like that. It reminds me of a book that I'm actually in the process of reading now. I'm not sure if you've ever read it or heard of it. It's called The Mastery of Self by Don Miguel Ruiz. He's the author of The Four Agreements. Have you heard of that book?
It sounds familiar. It's something that I'm definitely going to check out.
Yeah, it's a really interesting book because he speaks very similar to what you were talking about knowing yourself and how important that is. And I just want to, come back behind what you said and just second that. I think that we have to first know ourselves intimately, and that will help us to be able to filter out all of the information that is coming at us. Like, it's a vital skill to have nowadays, to be able to filter through all of the information that we're I guess encountering on a daily basis, whether it's online, whether it's a podcast you're listening to, or YouTube videos, or even people that you're meeting in person. There's so much information that we're being bombarded with. And if you don't have a really good filter. And I think that that starts, as you mentioned, with understanding yourself to know which things are going to be beneficial when it comes to building yourself up, and what things are going to not help you at all, but actually be to your detriment. And when you're able to filter through those things by knowing yourself, I think it puts you in a position to be able to, as we're talking about, succeed in life.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very similar to friends, where
Hmm.
you ever had one of those, or have you ever seen someone that was in this very toxic relationship, and they'd be like, "Trust me, this week I'm going to end it with this person," and then
Right.
next week they're back with this person.
Yes.
It's because this is a person that's confusing toxicity with passion,
Mm,
and this is normally how it can happen in
hmm.
terms of social circles as well.
Right.
If you don't understand what you want out of your life, you're inviting everyone into your life. You're
Yeah.
like, this person, this person, this person, and you're thinking you're a very popular guy, not understanding that they're throwing you off your direction.
Hmm.
So taking in the right information is a lot like curating the right friend circle. So I'm definitely going to check out that book that you were mentioning.
Yeah,
It
and
seems
in case I
interesting.
got the name wrong, after we wrap up today, I'll definitely make sure that I send it over to you so you have the correct name for the book. But I know it's something like either self mastery or the mastery of self. I think it's the mastery of self. But yeah, man, I'll definitely let you know about it, and I hope that you'll be able to find value in it as well. And anybody else who's listening who is curious based on our mentioning in it. But I want to go back. You had mentioned that you started your journey back in 2018, and I would love to know what was the catalyst that led you to say, "Hey, I want to become a content creator. I want to become an entrepreneur."
So prior to 2018, I was doing other businesses with Amazon. I was doing
Okay.
global affiliate marketing. I was
Hmm.
doing virtual real estate, where I was buying websites, fixing it up, and selling it. But by 2018, I had this one friend who was like, "Hey, man, you should check out Twitter."
Mm.
And when I heard that, I was like, "Twitter? Nah, man, that app sucks." That was my initial perception
Yeah.
regarding it. And he's like, "No, trust me. Twitter has this section called self improvement space. You
Mm.
should just follow the accounts."
Mhm.
So I started to follow a bunch of different accounts within the Twitter self improvement space.
Mhm.
And I was like, wow, I mean, people are actually using Twitter to improve their lives. And
Yeah.
it's not just motivational fluff. There were a lot of these practical tips that different
Mhm.
people were giving in different industries.
Mhm.
And I just made a mental note of that.
Okay.
And around that time, I was working as an engineer, and I
Okay.
was restarting the Toastmasters program.
Mm.
For your listeners who are not familiar with Toastmasters, it's a public speaking club. And by 2018, they introduced the Pathways program.
Wow.
So back in the days, like everyone had to work out of the same book. But
Mhm.
nowadays in 2018, you could choose the path that you wanted to
Mm.
take for
Okay.
public speaking. So I wanted to level up my comedy game. So I took the comedy path.
Okay.
And as I started it, I was just tweeting a bunch of insights to myself.
Mhm.
That was my formula: give
Okay.
advice to your younger self. And I
Yeah.
still stick with that formula today for any
Mhm.
content that I create.
Right.
So I was just doing that. And within, I would say, 2 to 3 months, I had a
Mhm.
whopping 8 followers. Right? I was
Yo, I
tweeting.
know that feeling, man. I
Yeah,
know that feeling.
I was tweeting into the abyss.
Yes.
But I just kept tweeting left and right. And
Mhm.
one day there was this a pretty big account that
Mhm.
found my page,
Mm.
followed my page, and
Mhm.
this is one of the self improvement accounts I was following in the beginning stages
Wow.
before I ever sent a tweet.
Yes.
And randomly, just one night, he gives me a shout out. I get
Wow.
250 followers one night. And
Wow.
yeah, so you never know when something cool can happen with you. You don't
Never
plan for
do.
it; it just happens.
Yeah.
So soon, people started to discover a lot of my tweets,
Mhm.
and a couple of months goes on by, and
Mhm.
one day there's this guy that DMs me and is like, "Hey, you're the public speaking guy. I need your help." And he was telling me that he had a best man speech coming up, and he
Mhm.
needed help um, crafting the speech. And
Yes.
he's like, "I'll pay you." I was like, "You'll pay me? How much are you gonna pay me?" He's like, "I don't know." And he just gave me a price. I
Yeah.
was like, you are not going to be paying me that price. Here's my PayPal, just in case you change your mind. Right. And then he ends up paying me. As
Mhm.
soon as I make that transaction, I
Right.
was like, whoa, this could be
Yeah.
a business. This could be a business.
Mhm.
And this is something that I'm congruent with. I'm
Mhm.
already learning public speaking,
Yeah.
impromptu speaking in
Mhm.
Toastmasters. And it just clicked with me where
Right.
Amazon affiliate marketing,
Mhm.
virtual real estate, I liked it, but it didn't click with me like the
Mm.
Armani Talks business did.
Yes.
And I still just kept on proving the concept. I
Mhm.
continued to get more clients. Eventually, I released my book, Level Up Mentality. You can probably see it
Yes.
in the middle right there.
Yes.
And I just gradually grew it brick by brick. So
Mhm.
it wasn't something that I was planning out from the beginning. It's just
Mhm.
something that organically happened.
Oh man, I love that. And it really reminds me of something that I recently heard Gary Vee sharing on a video where he was saying where a lot of content creators go wrong is that there are two things that they fail to do. And the first one is being authentically themselves, right? You would think that that goes without saying, but a lot of people try to emulate and be other people. And I've even fallen into that trap. I remember when I first came back to YouTube my second time around, I was emulating a motivational speaker and, presenting content like that. And it didn't last long because I knew that that really wasn't me. I wasn't all
Mhm.
hyped up and amped up all the time. And even though I don't think I consciously was aware that I was doing that, I look back and I know that, man, I was definitely not trying to be true to myself. And I think that that is one of the pieces of the puzzles that he mentioned. And then the second piece that people often forget is that they don't focus on talking about things that either one, they know really well, or that is of interest to them. They try to go in
Mm.
topics that, they're completely foreign to and try to just kind of hop on the bandwagon. And if you're not authentic and you're not talking about something that it's going to be an uphill battle. But if you're authentically yourself, you're talking about something that or you're interested in, you'll have success. And I just bring that up just because I feel like that's what happened with you. You come across as yourself and you're genuine. And on top of that, you have knowledge and insight when it comes to public speaking. And it's something that you can add value to other people in, and you enjoy doing it. Like you mentioned, you were able to totally remove all of that other stuff that you were doing that didn't just come naturally to you, or that you just felt like, yo, this is the perfect place for me.
Absolutely. And you made a good point in regards to that, where you said that you came back the second time to YouTube.
Mhm.
When you were initially mimicking the motivational speaker,
Mhm.
what made you realize, or you were just like, nah, this isn't for me?
That's a good question. Like, I feel I don't think I stopped doing the videos because I thought I was emulating him. I thought I can only recognize that now years later. I stopped doing it because I chose to go all in on podcasts. And that was like the primary reason why at the time, um, you know, 7, 8 years ago, I was like, all right, like I'm on YouTube, but I'm actually gonna stop and just transition into podcasting full time. But looking back, I know that I wasn't being genuinely myself. The things that I was talking about was interesting. It was something that I like talking about, but it just wasn't me being myself genuinely, though.
Absolutely. And I could definitely, uh, I could definitely agree with that. And I'm sure a lot of individuals who are creating content for the first time, they're going to empathize with that too, because when you're creating content, it's as though there's this mirror that's sticking back at you, and
Mhm.
you have to discover yourself in many ways, create yourself in many ways. And it is one of those processes where you're figuring out what is it that makes me resonate.
Right. Right, man. I totally agree. And it's so important for us to recognize when we're not being genuine, when we're entering into a space where we don't really have any interest. And I think that when we can identify that, we need to pivot. At least that's been my response to it. Is I'm like, yo, that's not where I'm meant to be. And I can tell when I'm in, I think some people call it what do they call it? Like the sweet spot. When you're in that place where just everything is in alignment and everything just seems to just go so smoothly. I know what it's like to be there, and it's totally different when compared to when you're going up an uphill battle and you're doing something that you're really forcing.
Oh yeah, and I'll tell you a funny story about that.
Yeah.
So I had this one a guy that followed me on Twitter, and
Hmm.
eventually he got interested in my service,
Okay.
and he wanted to learn how to speak better in front of the camera.
Okay.
So we ended up creating a private YouTube channel for him, which
Oh
is
wow.
possible, by the way, for your
Hmm.
listeners. You just don't make the video public. And
Makes
this is a
sense.
great way to watch yourself, create content in your own
Hmm.
safe space, and build a library. And we're building this library for him. And he's just like, I like it, but I don't love it. So I'm like, what do you love?
Right.
Or do you have a rough idea about it? And
Hmm.
he's like, I love writing. And then he just goes on to undermine writing. He's like, yeah, but
Mm.
writing, what can you really do with writing? I'm like, dude, you could build an empire with writing, especially if you become great at it. I mean, why are you so interested in learning how to speak in front of the camera
Mhm.
rather than improving your writing skills? Now, granted, speaking in front of the camera is great,
Mhm.
but why don't you understand what you already have?
Right.
So that's when he's like, okay. And we now shift our package from go, being great in front of the camera
Mhm.
to improving writing. And that's when he
Wow.
starts building his swagger. He builds his confidence. He starts to get a hub of ideas.
Mhm.
And nowadays, when he records these LinkedIn videos,
Mhm.
it just flows out of him. It doesn't
Wow.
feel like he's talking to the camera. It's
Yeah.
just he's articulating himself in front of a camera. So it's
Mhm.
a difference in mindset. The point being is you want to see what you're already good in and go
Yeah.
from good to great, and then you can expand.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think that that's definitely the way to go, and it's the way that you'll be able to find the least resistance. And there's enough things externally working against us. The last thing we need to do is start to internally work against ourselves. So yeah, man, I'm really glad that you shared that. Going to my next question, what I would love to know now, you talked about starting in 2018, coming to that place where you were able to find your sweet spot, the thing that you enjoy doing. And you even told us about that first sale. Was that the first time that you decided like, hey, I can actually make a business out of this? Or were there some other experiences that you had to go through before you were like, okay, I'm really ready to start a business now?
So that's a great question. Where when I had that sale, it automatically just flipped my mindset from Armani Talks being strictly a hobby to it
Hmm.
now being a business as well.
Wow.
And prior to that, since I had so many business experience in the
Hmm.
online space, I knew how the whole process of monetization worked.
Hmm.
It's just for me at that point, it was finding something that I could do 10 years from now,
Yeah.
15 years from now.
Mhm.
And it's difficult, Jay, when you're over here trying to, let's say, think long term and you're
Yes.
trying to network a lot with others,
Hmm.
because unfortunately, lot of others are not thinking long term. They'll give
No.
you a lot of advice like, well, if you do such and such, then you can cash out by just 1 year.
Right.
And a lot of them don't have that wealth building mindset, building a
Yeah.
portfolio, where I'm sure with your podcast, you view them as intellectual property, digital
Mhm.
assets that may even outlast you.
Right.
So that's what it became a game of, Jay, where I was,
Mm.
when I made that initial sell, I knew
Mhm.
that there was a business potential here. But
Mhm.
now it was like, where do I exactly learn from? Because
Yeah.
with internet businesses, these are rather new. I mean, you can't, there's not decades worth of studies on internet businesses.
Nope.
So you have to study from a variety of different fields. And
Yeah.
that's what I eventually ended up doing.
Okay. Wow. I love that. So what was the first decision that you made when it came to like your business? Like what service or product did you say, okay, this is what I'm going to offer to start with? Was it continuing with that first client that came in who wanted some assistance when it came to writing a speech, or did you go in a different direction?
It started off with that. It started
Okay.
off with public speaking help. So
Okay.
initially, it was how can someone get the ideas from their mind to
Hmm.
the outside, and
Yes.
then it evolved into how can they practice the speech? How can they
Hmm.
deliver the speech?
Hmm.
What are some things that they should look out for leading up to the speech?
Hmm.
And by having a coach and a consultant, they were able to feel comfortable with the process. Then,
Yes.
once they successfully gave their speech, they began to send me referrals to others. Around the
Nice.
same time, I also joined a BNI.
Mm,
BNI is a business networking group in your
mhm.
local area where there's one position for each position where you're pretty much responsible for referring others.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. So it's a unique thing. So let's say you're a podcasting coach, uh,
Yes.
and you end up getting selected for the chapter.
Hmm.
There can only be one podcasting coach for that chair.
Okay. That
So
makes sense.
all the other members, let's say they own a lawn service,
Hmm.
a hypnotist, a bunch of different positions. If
Hmm.
their friends ever need a podcasting coach, they know who to refer to.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So when I was initially starting Armani Talks, I
Hmm.
had my leads coming in from Twitter. I had my
Hmm.
leads coming in from BNI. I was mainly focusing on public speaking services.
Okay.
But then 2020 happened.
Yeah.
Coronavirus started happening, and
Game changer.
a game changer. And a lot of individuals weren't giving live speeches. A
Hmm.
lot of individuals were trying to learn how to speak in front of the camera,
Right.
learn how to get their podcast up and going.
Hmm.
And they had a lot of ideas. They just didn't know how to get it from point A to point B.
Right.
So that's when I evolved my services from just public speaking to
Hmm.
digital content creation. And
Yeah.
I helped them with communicating better in front of technology.
I love that, man. That natural progression, right? And that's the way it should be. I think sometimes we have the tendency to force things like, okay, well, I got to create this product. I got to start offering this service. But I love the fact that you just responded to the need of your audience. Your customer base had a specific need, and you said, hey, you know what? I have value that I can add. I can help you to solve this problem. And oftentimes that's really all it boils down to.
Oh yeah, and you never know what will happen because no one
Yeah.
predicted uh, the COVID thing in
No.
2018. Oh yeah, just be prepared. 2 years from now, something like that's
Right.
going to happen. It just naturally happened, and I
Yeah.
noticed. I have a survey on my site where
Hmm.
people can choose the service that they're looking for, and it
Okay.
just became disproportionate towards digital content creation.
Mm-hmm.
So I still give services for people that are looking to give a best man speech in a live wedding
Hmm.
or giving a presentation at a work conference.
Hmm.
But nowadays, there's an added part where
Hmm.
YouTube, podcasting is in the mix.
I like that. I like that. So, one of the key things when it comes to not just being a content creator and getting people to respond to your content, but ultimately becoming a businessman or a businesswoman out there, and you need an audience, right? You need somebody to sell to. And I would love to talk about how, with you starting on Twitter, what did you do to build an audience, and what can our listeners and our viewers do as well to build an audience as content creators on Twitter?
On Twitter. So
Yes.
with Twitter, what you want to do is you want to be consistent.
Okay.
The more that you build consistency, the more that you're going to have these black swan moments where
Mhm.
uh, Twitter is not a linear thing where you're just
Mhm.
getting one new follower a day.
Mhm.
There may be a long span where you don't get any followers, and then boom, out of nowhere, you
Mm.
get a spike that you've been looking for.
Right.
But that can only happen if you're consistent.
Mhm.
So to be consistent, you need to trace it back one more level. How
Mm.
can you have that empowering narrative vision to be consistent? And this is where you want to focus on a skill that you're practicing yourself. You don't
Okay.
want to give public speaking advice or speaking in front of the camera advice if you never give a speech, if you never
Right.
record a YouTube video. So the more that you're practicing it yourself, the more that you're going to have in-field experience. And the
Mm.
more that you have in-field experience, the more that you're going to organically build an audience. And other than that, I recommend networking as well,
Mhm.
where in 2018 to 2019, in the initial stages of Twitter, there were a few other content creators that were starting their accounts at the same time.
Mhm.
So we all created a mastermind where we
Nice.
all um, had a group Twitter DM, and we would just bounce ideas off of one another. And it's
Mhm.
good to be consistent because content creation, it's difficult to be creative all the time, be consistent all the time. But if you see Jay is being consistent with his podcast, now you want to be consistent with your Twitter.
Right.
So I would recommend uh, practice what you preach.
Mhm.
I would recommend being consistent and
Mhm.
aim to build a network for success on Twitter.
Oh man, that's amazing. And since you are both on Twitter and on YouTube, if you had to choose which one is more effective for building an audience, which one would you say is the most effective?
So I would say Twitter is a quicker where you
Mm,
can hypothetically network with others. They may be able to give you shout outs.
mhm,
They'll back in the days, which isn't even
mhm.
that long ago, but back in the days, they used to have these thing called follow Fridays. So
Yeah,
one per, do you recall that?
yes, I do.
Yeah, I don't see that as much anymore. But every
No.
Friday, there would be someone that would uh, build a list of
Hmm.
accounts to follow, and each of these big accounts would retweet it to their audience. So now you're just getting a flurry of followers.
Yeah.
People don't do that as much anymore, but I would still say that Twitter is um, it's a very quick way to start content creation because
Hmm.
there's not that many variables. You just need your phone, and that's it. While with YouTube, over time, there's going to be more variables that you need, like
Hmm.
some lighting, a
Yeah.
mic, a camera. But even with YouTube, you can get started with just creating videos from your phone.
Hmm.
What I've noticed, Jay, is that YouTube is more of a long game because it
Yeah.
is a search engine.
Hmm.
So, videos that you did, like let's say 2 to 3 years ago,
Hmm.
it probably didn't seem like much 2 to 3 years ago.
Hmm.
Then out of nowhere, the algorithm picks it up and it starts breathing life into it.
Yeah.
Like my most popular video is something that I did in the end of 2020, and it
Wow.
still brings in a bunch of traffic.
Yeah.
While with Twitter, you're not necessarily going to see that. You're
Yeah.
going to get a tweet, and its shelf life is
Hmm.
24 hours unless you retweet it.
Hmm.
So it's different mindsets.
Yeah.
So for your audience members, it's what is it that I want to do? Right? Do you want
Hmm.
to get practice with creating content? Then start off with Twitter. Do you want to be in it for the long run? Then
Hmm.
start off with YouTube. But
Mm.
eventually, you'll find a way to merge the two. I
Right.
started off with Twitter, and then I expanded to YouTube.
Oh man, I'm really glad that you brought that up because I never even thought about how each those two, like Twitter and YouTube, they represent two different mindsets and they actually help you to develop in different ways. I agree with you totally. Like Twitter is more dependent on you, the person, and YouTube is more content dependent, where your ability to grow on YouTube is going to be based on the content that you put out. And like you mentioned, it could be a video that you did 2 years ago, 1 years ago. The shelf life is so much longer if you continue to release content and eventually something does pop, all of that old video, all of that old content you did can then regain some steam and, essentially exponentially create more growth for you and your channel. But with Twitter, it's different. With Twitter, it requires a lot more of your own personal consistency, putting up content because the shelf life of your tweets are not very long. It's like you have maybe 28 to 48 hours. If you get lucky and you have something go viral, maybe 72 max,
Oh yeah.
but that's pretty much it. Like, other than that, you are going to be dependent on the fact that you're able to consistently put out new content that's going to add value to your audience every single day or every single week. So I never really thought about it like that. It's really about what do you want to build up. And it's like if you struggle with consistency and you want to build that consistency up, then Twitter is probably the place to go because the minute you slow it down, that machine is going to slow down. But with
Oh yeah.
YouTube, it's just the opposite. There are some people who put up a bunch of videos, had one go viral, they could walk away from a month and still be racking in views just off of that old content that's there. So I love the fact that you focused on like one is long term and one is short term, and one is a lot more dependent upon the effort that you're putting in on a daily or weekly basis.
Absolutely. And here's
Yeah.
two ideas for your audience.
Hmm.
One idea is if you're struggling with being consistent on Twitter,
Hmm.
you should leverage the draft section on Twitter.
Hmm.
Where when I first started Twitter, I
Hmm.
issued this challenge. I have no clue why I did this, but I just want to see if others would participate.
Yeah.
It was called the 10,000 tweets challenge,
Wow.
where you're supposed to build 10,000 tweets in your draft section,
Hmm.
which is not that difficult to do. You're capable of doing it.
Hmm.
So eventually, there was this guy that interviewed me, and
Hmm.
his thread on the 10K tweet challenge ended up going viral. And I
Wow.
started to get a bunch of DMs about, I want in. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, you just do it. There's no
Yeah.
getting in. So they created their own group. They were thinking of all these different ideas to fill up their backlog,
Mm,
but a lot of them weren't successful with 10K, but they had 150. So if
yeah.
you have 150 tweets, something about you, you feel powerful. It's like
Right.
someone who has a lot of money.
Hmm.
Others don't know about it, but there's a certain swagger to them. They move
Yes.
with a lot of purpose. So that's idea number one. Try to fill
Hmm.
up your backlog the days that you're bored.
Hmm.
What I do is I'll just get the ideas from point A to point B. My
Hmm.
tweets aren't like in the draft section. It's not
Okay.
organized. There's spelling errors, punctuation
Hmm.
errors, all that.
Yeah.
All I'm trying to do is get the raw ideas out there.
Mm,
And the days that I'm not feeling creative, I'll
hmm.
pull a tweet from my backlog,
Hmm.
I'll clean up the spelling errors, and then
Hmm.
I'll just publish it. So boom.
Nice.
So that's one idea. The second idea is if your audience members are thinking about building Twitter and YouTube,
Hmm.
they actually can work with each other. A lot
Mm,
of my best YouTube video ideas came
hmm.
from a tweet that popped off
Wow.
or came from DMs in Twitter. Over time, you'll notice multiple people asking the same question.
Yeah.
Why am I keep running out of breath when I'm speaking? I'm like, multiple people who don't know each other are asking me
Hmm.
the same exact question. What about I make a YouTube video out of it?
Yeah.
So a lot of times, if you use Twitter correctly, you'll get ideas for YouTube.
I like that. I like that. Oh man, yo, you just gave them some gems right there, man. I absolutely love that. And let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges, right? Because I'm sure you've encountered some along your journey. And I know one that's common, especially when we go back to our YouTubers, equipment, lighting, all of these things, they're like, yo, this stuff costs money. Like oftentimes people don't start because they think, hey, it's going to require a lot of money for me to get started. What would you say to those people who have money being that issue that is limiting them or hindering them from getting started?
I would say just start off with what you have. So if you have a phone, you literally have everything that you need. You have a camera built in it, a speaker built in it. You're good to go. And then organically, just keep adding more and more layers. You don't need a lighting from the beginning. You don't
Yeah.
need a fancy video editor from the beginning. All you need to do is get in the habit of clarifying your ideas and speaking it out. And the
Mhm.
more that you do that, the more that you can add over time. So I would say
Right.
that's the biggest thing for your audience. Just start off with what you have now and then
Mhm.
perfect it later.
I like that. And what are some of the challenges that you personally encountered along your journey?
With YouTube,
YouTube or even on Twitter?
well, with YouTube and Twitter, I would say in the beginning, I was finding ways to connect the two. Where,
Mm,
so just for a little bit of context, my background is in engineering
mhm.
and I used to be a systems engineer.
Okay.
So, what a systems engineer does is that they see the whole, they don't just see
Mm,
the parts.
okay.
Where back in the days with engineering, it's like the hardware engineers would work in their own bubble, the software engineers would work in their own bubble, a QA would be in their own bubble.
Yeah.
And by the time they're done working in their bubble, they're supposed to create this integrated product that's supposed to work,
Right.
but it wouldn't. And it's
Hmm.
like, it's not rocket science why it's not working. It's
Right.
because you guys were doing your own thing this entire time.
Exactly.
So that's why the position of the systems engineer came in,
Mm,
who had understanding of the technical side
mhm.
along with the business side. So
Okay.
they know what the business people want and
Mhm.
they understand the technical aspects of whether or not it's possible and how you
Okay.
can deliver it in an efficient manner.
Right.
So the reason that I bring this up is because the systems engineering side of my mind is always still connected. I want to make sure like I could integrate it. And so I would say in the beginning stages, Jay, it was
Mhm.
about how can I integrate Twitter with YouTube?
Right.
And that's when the whole idea of dummy, you're over here creating all these threads. Why don't you add more nuance to these threads on a long form YouTube video?
Yeah.
So there's always going to be two problems that people have in
Mhm.
regards to content creation. One is that you don't have enough ideas. Okay.
Yeah.
And the other problem is that you have too many ideas. And
Mm,
both are problems. The
mhm.
first one struggles with creativity, the second one struggles with time.
Yeah.
Luckily for me, I've always had the second problem with too many
Mhm.
ideas. Um, but yeah, I mean, just to answer your question, for me, it was about I want everything to connect. I don't want it
Mhm.
to be like I'm just doing Twitter one day and then doing something completely new with YouTube. It's like, where's the theme behind it
Yes.
all?
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
And yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. And I think that that is the key. Once you can get everything connected, I think that is, to your point, the way you build a system, right? Because if things aren't connecting, if all of the dots aren't connecting, then there isn't a system. Everything is just operating independently. And as we know, when it comes to especially building a business, you want to make sure all of the dots connect. That's the way that you know that it becomes a well-oiled machine. You can predict what's going to happen when you do A. Okay, once I do that, B will occur, and then you can kind of go down the line and make sure that everything is running and operating the way that it should be. But that actually makes me think about another thing that I know you do, which is integrating email. And I think that we both can attest to how important it is if content creators want to start their own business to make sure that they own their customer list, not relying on the social media platform or on YouTube as the place where your audience is housed and that being the only place. With that in mind, how did you integrate getting people from being a YouTube viewer or being a Twitter follower to then getting on your email list?
But this is how I know you're smart, because email is king. And uh, a lot of individuals don't even think about that. They're like, oh,
Right.
well, look at how much Twitter followers I have. Look at how much YouTube subscribers I have.
Mhm.
But you got to understand, email is a distribution channel that you own, right?
Yes.
I'm sure you see a lot of individuals that, they'll say something wrong and then
Mhm.
boom, they're just banned.
Right.
And when that happens, what do you do now? It's like you built a house on a sandcastle
Yeah.
and you can't do much. But if you have an email list, now you have people that went out of their way to say, I want to hear more from Jay. I want to hear more from Armani.
Mhm.
So to answer your question, I recommend from the very beginning just to have that in your game plan. How can
Mhm.
I own my audience? Right.
Yeah.
So you give away valuable content for free. And then, have you ever heard of 1000 True Fans theory?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like eventually you let people know that you have an email list, and your 1000 true fans will sign up to join your email list. And there's the whole concept of a lead magnet where
Mhm.
you give something away for free in exchange for their email list. So I give away a free book called 6 Ways to Become a Confident Communicator. And
Nice.
uh, I'll give you that book if you join my email list. And a lot of individuals, they will just organically join it because they'll be like, that this guy has a lot of ideas that resonates with me. I want to hear more from him. And once you have the email list, it's important to actually email them whatever
Right.
your cadence is. It could be a monthly newsletter, it could be weekly, it could be daily, and your 1000 true fans will stick with it. I
Mhm.
have noticed, Jay, that a lot of individuals, they do start email lists and they'll be like, but I stopped because I saw a lot of people unsubscribing.
Mhm.
Just understand, if you build an email list, there's always going to be people unsubscribing. So expect that from the beginning so you don't get rattled. But whatever you set your uh, cadence to be, stick with it.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that up because oftentimes people get deterred by the fact that they're seeing people unsubscribing, but it's like, nah, like you still have a list. Like there's no there's no there's no guarantee that those people won't come back as well. So it's like don't stop what you're doing just because somebody else decided that they wanted to unsubscribe. You never know the reason why either. So yeah, I think that it's important to just stay the course, keep putting in the work that you're doing, and it'll eventually pay off. And this is just more of a personal question that I have for you when it comes to your Twitter audience and your YouTube audience. Which one have you found tends to convert at a higher percentage when it comes to getting on your email list?
Twitter. And I believe the reason why is because they're already seeing me writing.
Mhm.
So they're just stimulated in terms of words, and
Mhm.
then for them the next logical step is, all right, I'll get long from this guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me it's definitely been Twitter. And I do have metrics that are measured up. because
Mhm.
this lead magnet that I give away, I have one for YouTube and one for Twitter. And I'll say
Oh,
Twitter
nice.
converts way higher than the YouTube one.
Yeah. And I appreciate you for sharing that because it's really helpful for me in a space that I'm at right now because I'm at a place where I want to do YouTube and I want to do Twitter, but I just know for me, I'm better when I can just focus in on one thing. And then once I get a system developed for that one thing, then adding something else on. And I've just kind of been having this internal back and forth about, man, like, should I go all in on Twitter? Should I go all in on YouTube? And I recently made the decision to go all in on Twitter. But to your point
Nice.
earlier, I'm that guy that often has a lot of ideas like you. And it's like I keep getting all of these ideas of stuff that I can do on YouTube. And it just makes that keep popping back up in my head. Well, man, should I do YouTube? But listening to you, you helped me to get some clarity today because I know ultimately for me, the most important thing is being able to get people on an email list where I can eventually be able to, build up a business, actually have a customer list. And it makes no sense for me to go all in on something that is a lot more. I'm going to get a lot more resistance when it comes to ultimately achieving that goal as opposed to with Twitter. I can get more people on my email list. I can build an audience at the same time. The pros are just there, and I just need to execute. So I really appreciate you for sharing that because you definitely have given me some clarity today with regards to knowing which
Awesome.
direction I go in.
Awesome, man. I mean, no, for sure. I try to be transparent as possible because when I was starting, a lot of people were transparent with me. And the more transparency that someone gives you, the more that it adds clarity to your own path. So I'm glad that helped you out.
It did, man, and I really appreciate it. Yo, you have been absolutely amazing, Armani. I already knew that you would be because, like I said, your content is always on point, and I'm so grateful to have had you come on and be a guest on the show. Before we go, there's a fun little segment I like to play with my guests, and it's called Pick Three. The way that it works is I have a list of questions over here, and I'm pretty much going to ask you to pick a random number between 1 and 16. Based on the number that you select, there'll be a question that I'll read to you and we'll do that 3 times. And then after that, we'll wrap things up. That work for you?
That works with me.
All right, cool, cool. So, what would be your first question between, or your first number between 1 and 16?
7.
7. The question is, if you could go back in time, what is one thing that you would change about your business or how you got started?
What would I change about my business? I would say I would just start everything earlier. Where for
Mm,
me, everything was just organically. I was failing a lot. I was learning a lot. I was like, oh, whoa, I didn't know this. I didn't know that. But I would have just started everything earlier. I would have started
mm,
YouTube the same day I started Twitter, the same day I started my podcast. So, because time is very important. And the more
yeah,
time that you have, the more that the search engines, all this stuff starts favoring you.
mhm.
So, just start everything earlier.
I like that. I definitely like that.
For
What's your
anyone,
second?
for anyone that's overthinking right now,
Yeah,
start.
just start.
Your future self will thank you.
Right. I love that, man. Yo, that's the key is just getting started. And if we can overcome that hurdle, man, like everything else will fall in line. Like that, just do that. Like if you haven't done that, that's the first step.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, I love it. What's your second number between 1 and 16?
14.
14. The question is, oh man, I think this is the first time we've ever gotten this one. Thank you. So
Yeah.
this question is, you're stuck in an elevator for 30 minutes with any business owner, any influencer, or any celebrity. Who is it and what are you going to talk to them about for that 30 minutes?
Jeff Bezos, and I believe Jeff Bezos gets crucified by the media. He is seen as the greedy capitalist, but if you followed his career from the very beginning, he read his shareholder letters. He's always been consistent with what his vision was in mind. And the thing that captivates me the most about Jeff Bezos's philosophy is
Mhm.
that he treats his business like a scientist is in a lab. He
Mm,
experiments. He builds. Believes in innovation. It's not
mhm.
always about what the stock price is doing, going up and down.
Right.
So I would ask, what gives you so much confidence in long-term thinking and innovation? How did you stumble upon those ideas,
Mhm.
and what led you towards customer obsession?
Mm,
So I could ask him a lot of different questions, but
yeah,
he's always been one of the business people that I liked because of the long term focal point.
right. Oh man, I love that. Yo, you never know, man. It may happen one day.
Yeah.
Get to have that conversation,
I
man.
was like,
That'll be dope.
I was like, I knew I recognized that bald head of yours.
I love that, man. I love it. So, what's your third number between 1 and 16?
Let's go with one.
One, the question is, what is a book that has had a great impact on the way that you approach life or business?
So this is going to be an outlier. I would
Okay.
say, man, I have so many freaking books, man. Okay, so I'm going to say the one regarding my big toe.
Mm,
Uh, it's called toe because it means theory of everything. It's a book
mm,
on physics by Thomas Campbell, who gives a logical explanation about simulation theory and
mm.
the purpose of life. And he merges a lot of science with religion, metaphysics, this sort of stuff. Makes me feel alive. Like I love stuff like this, and he basically talks about the purpose is to is to become the best version of yourself, collaborate with others, and build bridges, not walls. And he breaks it down in a very scientific, logical framework that satisfies the engineering intellect. So I would say that's definitely given me a stronger perspective regarding Armani talks. It's allowed me to focus on the fundamentals rather than the trends. So anyone that's curious, it's My Big Toe by Thomas Campbell. And before reading the book, I definitely recommend checking out his YouTube channel where he, because the book can get overly technical,
Okay.
but if you watch his YouTube channel, like it gives you some understandings when you dive into the book.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to check that out. Like, I clearly have never heard of it before, but you definitely have piqued my interest. I'm gonna take your suggestion though. I'm gonna go over to the YouTube channel first so I can get, familiarized before I dive into the book and dive into the technical aspects of it.
Yeah, for sure. You'll definitely love it. I mean, he gives you a very holistic understanding of
Mm,
reality.
I like that. Yo, that's unique, man. Yo, I appreciate you for sharing that, man. Armani, this has been a joy. Before we wrap up, just want to hand the mic over to you. Are there any questions that you like to ask me personally, or any last or closing words you like to share with our audience?
So, how about I get one of your numbers and I ask you one of those questions?
That works.
Pick a number, 1 through 16.
Oh man, I love this. Okay, so this is the first time. I'm gonna go with number 8. So let's see. The question is, if you could own any major company, what would you do to make it better? Oh man, that is a great,
That's a
great
really
question.
good question.
Yeah. And I don't want to steal one of the best answers that I got from a guest, but like his answer was so good. I was like, yo, that makes total sense. Um, oh man, like that is a good question. What company would I want to own and how would I make it better? Um, dang. Dude, that is a good one. I really don't know. Like I really haven't thought that deep about like owning somebody else's company. But let's see. If I had to choose,
That is a good question, though. Not gonna
yeah,
lie.
what comes to my mind, and I think it's just me being a content creator, is I kind of would want to own YouTube, but I know that YouTube is ultimately, owned by Google. But I would love to kind of get a peek behind the scenes as to like how it all works. Like, and we as a content creator, we're chasing like the numbers, the subscribers. I would love to know like what the business side of YouTube looks like. I know it's about, generating ads and revenue, but I would want to know what the business looks like behind the scenes and how it will make it better. Is that I think I would do a lot more than they do when it comes to listening to content creators. And I know that there's a limit, when you're running a business, to what you can allow outsiders to dictate how you're running that business. But I think that there are some things that us as content creators desire or would like to see that often do get ignored. And I would love to put into place, at least whether it's having a conference or having some type of powwow where the content creators and the people on the platform actually get to voice their opinions, their ideas for what they would like to see happen on the platform to help them to become better content creators and ultimately make the business more money. So that's the one thing that kind of comes to my mind is,
Mm.
being at the helm of YouTube, to be able to understand how it works behind the scenes, as somebody that's not a content creator, and then doing what I can to provide a little bit more insight, a more appreciation, and maybe a little more power and influence to the content creators on the platform.
Great response. I mean, get that bird's eye view of YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, because this is the way I look at it, Armani, and let me know your thoughts. I think it's so easy sometimes to look at things just from our own limited perspective, and I can be like, oh man, well, the only thing that needs to be done is just this, that, and third. But if I don't first understand the flip side or an alternative perspective, how can I know that the things that I want to see changed on, in this case, YouTube, are actually going to be beneficial in the long run that will allow the platform to continue to run and operate the way that we want it to? Sometimes we never know that maybe there are some things that they can't give us as content creators because it would actually be detrimental to the longevity of YouTube or the ability for it to continue to be a free platform. So just being able to understand things from the other side, I think will put me in a place where I could actually then make decisions that could be beneficial for both.
I loved how you brought up getting the consumer side of it and the creator side, because
Mhm.
before I ever made a YouTube video, I used to always think, man, why are there so many ads on these YouTube videos? Why don't they just get rid of ads?
Yes.
Once I started making YouTube videos, I was like, yes, the partnership program. I was like,
Yes.
you guys keep the ads on. So just understanding both sides of the perspective helps so much.
Yeah.
So I definitely agree with that. Where I had this great or podcast episode
Mhm.
called Unapologetic Truths. It's a podcast I have with Life Math Money, where he was sharing a story about a king who was asking his people to make certain changes if they felt the need, and a lot of them were saying, "Oh, we should get rid of the bridge." And
Mm.
and then I don't recall the exact story, but
Mhm.
the basic premise was everything is there for a reason,
Right.
right? Just because we're not using it, just because we don't understand the purpose of it, you got to understand why that bridge was created the first place, why the walls were created in the first place.
Mm.
And I believe that sort of perspective applies to YouTube as well. I mean, why is the subscribe button red? Or why
Yeah.
isn't it blue?
Right.
So just getting that perspective definitely does help.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out because I was just looking at it from the two perspectives of the people who run and operate YouTube, the business owners and the content creators. But then you brought up a great point, the consumer. Like that's a totally different perspective. And I'm really glad that you pointed that out. And there was something else that I was going to add. I don't know if it'll come back to me. Oh, that's what I was going to say. It reminds me of, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with this author. Like I wasn't until one of my guests came on and mentioned him. His name is Blake Crouch. Have you ever heard of him?
Blake Crouch. No, I haven't.
Yeah, like he's a fiction author. Like one of
Fiction.
my guests, he had mentioned his books, and I went and read them. The reason why I bring it up is it's what when I've read his books, what it reminds me of is how important it is to weigh the pros and the cons, because his books are really a lot based around like technology and a lot of the advancements that we may one day see. And it shows you the benefits that these technologies can produce. And also it can show you some of the negative things. So I'll give you a quick idea, and I hope I don't like spoil it for anybody. But in one of the books, Recursion, this person creates a technology that ultimately is supposed to help people who suffer with Alzheimer's. She has a parent who has it. She wants to create a technology that will ultimately assist or eradicate Alzheimer's. Well, that invention that she eventually creates has some other consequences. It allows people to travel into time, and that allows people to take advantage of this tool that she created with a very noble purpose, but now they're not using it in a way that is going to be helpful, but they're using it, to eventually, create chaos, create wars. And I think that it puts us in a position where as individuals, we have to stop and say, what are all of the consequences of what I want to create? And I'll be honest, like as a content creator, I don't always weigh this, but I think it is important sometimes for us to do that. And it
Oh
kind of
yeah.
reminds me of what you mentioned of some content creators who we see who are getting banned on platforms. If we stop and say, what are the consequences of me putting this out? Like every single possibility. Okay, this is what I intend for to happen if I put it out. But then sometimes what you intend is not ultimately what's produced or the consequence that actually results. So yeah, man, it just reminded me of that. Just thought I'd add those 2 cents.
Well, that book reminds me a lot of the concept of Black Mirror. Have you ever heard of
Mm,
that show on Netflix?
I have, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very similar thing where it's like, when you have the technology you've always wanted or you thought was a good idea, is it really a good idea? And a lot of the episodes are so spooky where you're like, yeah, actually, this could be a good idea. And as the episode progresses, you're like, nah, this is not a good idea.
Nope.
One of the episodes, you get to rank your interaction with someone, and you could see their overall rating. So let's say
Wow.
I'm done with this podcast. I'm like, man, this is a 10 out of 10. Jay's a great
Mhm.
interviewer.
Yeah.
But let's say you you deal with your electrician and he has a
Mhm.
bad experience with you. He gives
Mhm.
you a 5. So 10 plus 5,
Yeah.
overall it starts adding up. So what begins to happen is that the main character starts looking around and
Mhm.
automatically she sees someone with a 3 on their forehead,
Mhm.
and this person can be a great person, but
Yes.
automatically there's all these preconceptions like,
Mhm.
why do they have a 3 on their head? Why not a 7? What did this person do? And she's over here judging others in the beginning of the episode, but
Yeah.
as the episode progresses,
Mhm.
bad stuff starts to happen to her where her
Mhm.
ranking keeps getting lower and lower and
Wow.
lower. And it's a crazy episode where you're just like, whoa, I was not expecting it to take that turn.
Yeah, and it reminds me of something that I know it's been talked about in certain circles about like social scoring. That's really what it seems like, social
That's what
scoring
it's
and
like.
ranking.
Hmm.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, you don't know. Well, this is what it really reminded me of. It removes context, right?
Yeah.
Like even when you look at a product review on Amazon, like if we only go based on the rating, which is often what most people do, is they be like, "Oh man, I've done it." There when I'm going and looking at an ebook or audiobook that I want to read, if I look in it has like a 3 star, I'll be like, oh man, no, I'll come back to it. But what I've learned to do is I'll stop and then, well, how many reviews has it gotten? And I'm like, oh, like it's a 3 star, but it's only gotten one review. Like that's
Oh
just
yeah.
one person. Like how can I judge it off of that? But it totally changes when it's a 3 star and it's like 5,000 reviews. Then it's like, oh man, well, like 5,000 people believe that this product is just okay. But at the end of the day, it removes context because sometimes I'll read reviews on Amazon and see a program, or excuse me, a product that has gotten a bad review. But then when I read the actual review that the person left, I'm like, those aren't even issues for me.
Yeah.
Like this person is complaining about not the product
The
itself, but the delivery. I'm
actual.
like, why are you giving the product itself a bad rating when you're just not pleased with the delivery service? So context is so important, and that was the only thing that I wanted to point out. Yeah.
Well, there was on our side of Twitter.
Mhm.
Every now and then, you'll see someone whose tweet goes super viral, and it starts to attract people from other sides of Twitter.
Mhm.
So, for those of you who don't use Twitter, it's like this big universe, and there's multiple galaxies. So, whenever a tweet goes viral, your galaxy is over here interacting with other people's galaxies.
Yeah.
So, one of the creators from our side, his tweet blew up, and he
Mhm.
has a bunch of books that are only 99 cents on Amazon.
Mhm.
He believes in pricing it a little, and he has a huge volume of work. So the
Okay.
99 cents adds up.
Yes.
So when this tweet went viral, it was polarized. A lot of people hated the tweet. So they went on his Amazon, they started to buy the books for cheap, and they started to leave 1 star reviews.
Wow.
So if you nowadays find his page, all you see are like 1 star, 2 star reviews for these great books. He's a
Yes.
great writer, by the way, and
Mhm.
it just removes so much context.
Yeah.
So when I was watching that Black Mirror episode, I was
Mhm.
just thinking about this guy. I'm like,
Yeah.
man, your body of work is not really getting judged. It's just that one viral tweet
Mhm.
that is spilling over.
Yeah. One
It
experience.
happens.
Yeah, and I mean, think about it. Like I, don't- we're talking about human nature, right? These things aren't really new in the sense of, the existence of mankind. There's always been one aspect or one element or one experience that a person or, unfortunately, sometimes a group of people get judged by. And, it's a reality in our world, sadly. But I think to the point that we've been talking about, and these different creators, whether it's television shows or authors that are kind of pointing the light on this, is the fact that we have to do what we can to not play the role or play a part in continuing that type of behavior.
For sure. And it definitely does start with catching ourselves, because you're right, where you're like, man, I sometimes do that. Same with me. I sometimes do that too, where I'll look at a product, I'll be like, what? A 3-star review? And
Yeah.
then I'll look at it, I'm like, oh, just two people wrote the review. And
Mhm.
one of the people, they're actually complaining about the delivery. Oh, it came 1 hour later. I'm like, 1 hour? That's not even that
Right.
big of a deal. So, so no, that's definitely important.
Yeah. Oh man, yo, Armani, I know we could talk on and on, man, and I'm really enjoying it. What I want to do before we get out of here is just give you the opportunity to let our audience know how they can get in contact with you. If there's anything that you want to promote or any way that they can work with you, please let us know.
For sure. So, one of the best ways to access me, if you enjoyed my interview with Jay, is to check out ArmaniTalks.com. This website has all my books, my blogs, my podcasts, my videos, all gathered in one area. So, you don't have to go all over the internet trying to find out more about me. And if you would like to work with me, there's also a free consultation that I offer, 15 minutes. You'll see it on ArmaniTalks.com. So, you'll get anything Armani related on that website. So go on and check it out if you resonated with me.
Perfect. Yo, Armani, you're absolutely amazing, man. If you're ever interested in coming back and being a guest on the podcast, it would truly be an honor.
For sure. And great job with the interview. It flew by. We're already 1 hour in, and
Yeah.
it felt like we just started.
Right, it does, man. Thank you again, man, for coming on the podcast. I truly appreciate you.
For sure. A great episode.